From fear to fascination. How my 2024 culminated in a memorable scare at Murchison Falls. 2024, by its very nature, had been a long year by all counts and measures. Beyond the loss of loved ones, the illnesses, and the usual hustles of life, it fell nothing short of the blessing that it was. On 4 different occasions, I had been pronounced uncle, witnessed the marital union of a sister, a brother, and a friend, among other things. For one who loves to travel, I surely did myself justice in comparison to all the years gone by. I visited a gentleman and got a taste of their blistering sun, spent 2 nights in the oven-hot city of Lyra, and knocked off a local dream destination on my bucket list. By mid-December, I felt the weight of a year's exhaustion on my shoulders, struggled to treat and cure a cough that lasted more than 3 weeks. I tried every magic treatment to little relief before ending up with a cannula in my left arm that delivered 2 injections. A week later, I was back to the same treatment center for malaria treatment that ended with another dose of injections and what I remember to be a heap of tablets to swallow with some strict orders from the nursing assistant. Fortunately, or unfortunately for me, depending on which way you slice it, it came at a time when I was almost taking my annual work leave. As we approached Christmas, in the midst of an illness and a periodic cough, I felt the need to hibernate, and yet there was a lot to do and plenty to plan for. Declined interview requests for my YouTube channel Football Tribe UG only sunk my morale, working tirelessly to drain me of any positive energy I had left to carry me to the finishing line of the year. The silver lining in this dark cloud was the hope of families coming together for the festive season. It's always been a jolly and memorable period for most. A reminder that there's something to live for even when everything isn't working out the way we had hoped. I also look forward to knocking a few things off my bucket list, some of which included a lot of traveling. I love to travel, driven by the passion for adventure, the satisfaction derived from seeing the scenic beauty of nature and the breath of fresh air that comes with it, the thrill of a drive with music blasting in the background, and more. After our engagements in northern Uganda's business capital of Lyra City, we decided to drive to Murchison Falls National Park, arguably Uganda's biggest in land cover. We arrived at Red Chili's shortly before dark, where we were welcomed by a slim brown young man called Linus. Having not booked in advance, we ironed out our accommodation particulars, put in our dinner orders, and the one for the following day's breakfast. A few numbers crunched, a fairly detailed briefing given, the eyebrow-raising part being the warning that hippos visit the cottage in the night to graze. One is advised to move with a torch on in the night, so light can easily reflect in their eyes, and you see them. With that in mind, dreading the unknown, we all agreed to take our showers before it would turn too dark to freely move around. As luck would have it, while we waited for our dinner to be served, mulled over the following day's planned itinerary, we were called by one of the cottage attendants to watch a gigantic hippo that had come to graze on the compound grasses. Meanwhile, our team lead was busy pressing to have an audience with our recommended tour guide, a fairly small and tall dark-skinned young man, possibly in his mid or late 20s, called Ronald, who charged a reasonable $25 USD for the game drive. Post-dinner, we engaged in simple chit-chats, gossiped about other tourists that had filled up the fireplace area, scrolled through our phones until it was time to retreat to our respective cottages to rest. It had been such a long day, and yet for a good game drive experience, you ought to wake up very early in the morning and start. The morning air was crispy as we drove through the vast green lands of the Murchison. As the skies let loose, a golden glow from the rising sun paved the savanna, but I still couldn't appreciate it well enough. My heart heavy, my thoughts clouded with wishful, circumstantial scenarios. I was missing Justine, who by now I had left miles and miles away in spite of the fact that our coexistence in the same space depended on another person. Bar the no sight of the big cats of the jungle, the drive went well. After the morning's adventures, we drove to the sweltering town of Pakwak, modest as one would imagine. Here we refueled, grabbed a few snacks, and retreated to Red Chili's for a moment's rest while we waited for our afternoon boat cruise on the Nile. The boat cruise delivered everything it promised to be, a fun escapade during which we saw multiple schools of hippos, the famous Nile crocodile basking on the riverbanks, the gargantuan elephants, and concluded it with a distant sight of the Murchison Falls. We drove to Nile Safari Lodge, hoping to have our dinner there, but were bounced because we hadn't booked in advance. We settled for a Red Child's dinner of Gambian beef, served with white rice, Swedish chicken balls, served with pasta, and other exotically named foods that were on the day's menu. For the second day running, we woke up in the hens for a game drive with the hope of seeing the kings of the jungle having traced for them to no luck the previous day. We drove as far as the point where the Albert Nile meets Lake Albert with little luck, except for the sight of the beautiful rising sun, the buffaloes, Jackson's hartebeest, cobs, warthogs, and bushbucks. On our way back, we encountered another group of tourists who insinuated that a group of game drivers had spotted the lion somewhere. We drove a little faster to the site, hoping to be lucky. But upon arrival, even those with binoculars were struggling to catch sight of the said lions. People stood on the rooftops of their SUVs and vans, peering their eyes through the thick savanna, hoping against hope that they would see the lions, but to no success. A UPDF pickup came around with a soldier armed with what appeared to be an AK-47. We judged the gentleman and his team to be game rangers. After waiting for some time, asking to be pointed in the direction where the lions had been sighted, they drove off track to go see them. I remember having an odd suggestion that the soldier fire a single bullet in the air with the idea that the noise would scare them out of hiding and we get to see them. Of course, that's not allowed, but desperate times call for desperate measures. In the end, justifies the means, I thought to myself. We watched them from a distance as they drove off track. Search for the lions to zero success, against our better judgment. After a while, we followed part of their trail hoping for a different result, that perhaps our lucky gods would come on the trail with us and search for these elusive predators. As we drove through the tall and short grasses, trees and thickets at different intervals, we saw no trail to follow, no sign of animals, clearly off track, desperate to find something familiar, at the very least an old track. My neighbor to the left, a young brown belle and a passionate explorer in her 20s who for the whole length of the trip was desperately intentional on seeing the lions, was scared to near tears. Her face frowned in total fear and regret, to the extent that she couldn't peer through the windshield anymore to see where we were even going. Initially, she bent her face in her knees before lamenting a few words, her voice barely above a whisper and falling to the other side of the seat. To be fair, I think everyone in the car got scared, including the driver, but looking in her direction alone would spike one's cortisol and adrenaline. However, everyone had harbored a different reason for their fright, having paid courage as the only currency to take a 3-hour-long boat cruise the previous day. I thought there was nothing else that held propensity to shake my new acquired brevity. And yet here I was, feeling shaken by the thought of getting the car stuck in the bush, either with a flat tire or just in a random ditch of some sort in the middle of nowhere, where calling for help would only land us in even bigger trouble of paying fines for an off-track drive in the pursuit of the big cats. The driver, too, seemed scared by the lack of a clear pathway to drive through, having to rely on our guide to point him into the right direction. At some point, we're all scared into a moment of silence, with the guide the only one speaking as he gave our chauffeur instructions on where to drive next. At this point, I likened the situation to that of being on a boat cruise, a moment when your point of departure is no longer in sight, just as much as your destination. You find yourself caught between a rock and a hard place, wondering whether to go back or continue. By the time we emerged out of that bush, and onto what appeared to be an old track that hadn't been used for probably a month, those that had desperately wanted to see the lions had lost their appetite, all eager to end the game drive at the earliest sight of the exit route. But given how long the drive back itself can be, people were eased back into their moods as we set sights on other animals like the beautiful and towering giraffes, as well as orbeez. The highlight of the tour for me was at the breathtaking Murchison Falls, where nature and magic come together to create a spectacle of a scenery. The Victoria Nile dissects the park into two dicotyledons for a whopping 100 kilometers as it flows west from Karuma Falls to the Albert Nile, and on the extreme edge of the Albertine Rift Valley. The Nile squeezes through a 6-meter ravine with a roaring force to form the powerful 50-meter Murchison Falls. From a distance, at the viewing ridge, you're thrillingly showered by sprinkles of water that comes in different intensities. So for 2025, I don't know what's on your bucket list, but I suggest you find a way of adding Murchison Falls National Park for an extreme adventure. Hi everyone, This is Robert K. Circles. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Give us a like on your favorite podcast platform. Leave a comment letting us know what you thought. We love hearing your feedback. And if you know someone who might enjoy the show, please share it with them. Your support means the world to me and helps us reach more listeners. Thanks again for being a part of the Robert K. Circles community. Until next time, take care.